guys, welcome back to my IGTV. Sorry if there's a little bit of extra noise in my video today. It is so hot in Switzerland at the moment. It's going to be 32 degrees today, so I have the window open and I have a fan on me right now. If you see my hair waving in the breeze, that's what it is. I'm not trying to be all fancy, it's just really hot. I wanted to jump straight into our topic today, and this again is another question I get asked quite a lot via DM. And that is, how do you create a consistent color theme in your Instagram feed? The reason I think I get asked this question a lot is because it also comes with a complaint, and that is it's just too hard to keep up a consistent color theme all the time. And my response to that is yes, it is hard, but that's what makes it an art and that's what makes it unique. And if it was easy and it required zero effort and any kind of snap would just fit into your feed, then everyone would have beautiful, amazing feeds. So yeah, it is going to take some effort, but it's not impossible. A good thing to remember is that if you do want to stand out and you do want to be unique, you have to put that extra effort in, and you have to realize that not every single photo and every single opportunity is going to be able to be used on your feed. But with those photos that you still really love and don't particularly fit in well on your Instagram feed, the way I use these is either in my blog posts or on my Instagram stories, so I still get to share them, but they're not ruining the cohesiveness of my feed. So my first tip is a pretty obvious one, but the main thing you need to look for when you're trying to find photo locations is the colors that you want to include in your feed. And if you have a location in mind that doesn't necessarily have a lot of the one color that you want in it, then the best way to get around this is to bring your own props. So it might be the outfit you're wearing, or you might have a bunch of flowers. It could be anything. Just try and get as much of that color into the scene as you can. If you haven't watched my IGTV episode about finding perfect photo locations yet, I will link to it in the description for you. And number two, and probably the most important component to having a cohesive color Instagram feed, is using the right editing software. So the two big ones for this are Lightroom and VSCO. So VSCO has actually just brought out some similar features to Lightroom where you have more control over individual colors. However, Lightroom is definitely the market leader in this space and the most powerful editing tool that you can use. I usually use Lightroom on desktop just because you end up with a higher quality outcome, but also it's available on mobile. The great thing about the mobile version is that it is completely free to use for anybody. There is just a few features that aren't included in the free version, but you definitely do not need these to be able to create a consistent color feed. So now I'm going to jump over to my phone and show you the most important editing tools you need to focus on. So I've just opened up my Lightroom CC mobile app and I've clicked into the photo that I'm going to edit today. I wanted to pick a photo that wasn't obviously pink, so I could show you guys how I edit a photo that's slightly challenging and I get that color in there without being too over the top. So the first thing I always look at is the light tab. So this one, the exposure is pretty good, but I'm going to just bring it up a tiny bit. And then the contrast, I'm going to drag that up to about 60. The highlights, I'm going to bring those down because there's a few overexposed areas like the sky. And then the shadows, I'm going to bring those up. And then the whites, as similar to the highlights, I'm going to bring those all the way down. And then the blacks I'm just going to leave in this photo. So the next tab we're going to look at is the most important tab when we're looking at creating color consistency. So the first section we'll look at is the temperature. I'm going to increase the warmth just a bit, and it does look a bit too warm at the moment, but once we go into our color mix I will fix that up. And then the tint for me is always scaling up the pink because I have a pink themed feed. This is something I also always do, and that is pull the vibrance up to about 30 or 40 and then pull the saturation down about 10. Just because the vibrance is actually smarter than the saturation, so it will increase the saturation in the right ways without going too over the top, whereas saturation can sometimes become a bit too unnatural looking. Next, we're going to click into the mix in the top right hand corner, and this is where we have control over individual colors, and this is the most powerful part of the Lightroom app. For this photo, I decided to wear a pink headband because I knew being in a sunflower field there wasn't going to be a lot of pink happening. So I want to increase the saturation of my reds, which is actually where the pink headband sits. A lot of the time pinks are actually in the red, not in the magenta. Just keep that in mind if you're also creating a pink feed. I'm also going to bring the luminance down a bit and slide the hue over to the pink side a little bit. Orange is where our skin tone normally sits, so I'm going to illuminate my skin a little bit, bring the saturation down a little bit. Then yellow, so we obviously have a lot of yellow in this photo and not a lot of yellow shows up in my feed. So I'm going to pull the saturation down a bit, which is also going to affect the green, which I also don't want too much of. The hue, I want to pull a little bit to the orange side of the scale, which is going to bring in a few more pinky tones, and I'm going to lift the illumination up of them so they're not so yellow. Green, I'm actually going to slide all the way, or just a bit of the way towards aqua, also bring the saturation down and illuminate those leaves a bit more. So I usually just play around with this a lot until it's looking about right. It's going to be different for every photo. We don't actually have any aquas in this photo, so I'm going to leave that. Blues, let's see, my overalls, so I'm going to just make those a little bit more aqua toned and a bit lighter. And then purple and pink we also don't really have a lot of. Okay, so that's our color mixing done. The next really important part of creating a consistent color feed is using the split tone feature, which you'll find under the effects tab. Up in the right hand corner there's a split tone. So this is actually going to add a tonal filter over the top of your photo in the highlights and in the shadows, and you can choose what that tonal filter is. So I always use the hue 333. So it's a bit touchy here because you can't type it in. So 333 saturation about 10, that'll do. And then the same in the shadows. So 333 and about 10. And now you can see I've got a much more pink look to my photo. So there's the before and there's the after at the moment. Now what I'm going to do is go back into the lighting and actually lift the exposure even a bit more now that I've edited all of my colors. And finally, the last tool that I use a lot for color consistency is actually only part of the paid app, but I'm going to show you anyway just so you can see what it adds. So it's the selective editing tool, and that's going to allow us to edit just selected parts of the photo rather than the whole photo. So I'm going to click the plus, and for this one I want to make a bit of a more rosy sky, so I'm going to use the gradient tool and just drag that over. So the red is showing us now where our editing is going to affect in the photo. So I'm going to place it there. I'm going to go into the color tab where we have our split toning. So it's in a different location when we go into the selective edits, but it's essentially the same thing. So I'm going to slide over to my hue of 333 and then bring that saturation up. And then so that it's going to show up, I'm actually going to have to drop the exposure of the sky. And you can see the more we drop it, the more of that pink rosy tone that we will start to see. And then another thing we can play with here is the tint and the temperature, if the color's not looking quite right. And then tick, and we have our before which is not pink at all, and then our after, which is going to fit in much more nicely to my pink feed. So I hope that was really helpful, guys. As always, I'd love to continue this conversation in the comments below, so head down there and leave me some feedback, ask me some questions, share some tips of your own. I will also be linking to my one-on-one Instagram coaching in the description of this video, just in case you're interested in getting some direct feedback and help with your Instagram account. Until next time, guys, bye!